Welcome everybody. I think we're going to have a few folks still trickling in. Parking can be a little surprisingly tricky in this area. My name's Heather. I'm the volunteer coordinator for the San Francisco Women's March. Been doing this since the first march in 2017, and I'm continually inspired by all the folks who turn out year after year to make this a fun and safe and meaningful event for our city and our community. This is only possible with volunteers, so thank you. So we're gonna try and end at about 7:45-ish, so we'll keep things moving. A couple housekeeping things. Bathrooms are right around the corner. They're right over there on the left. And we're going to have everybody hold their questions until the end. So I'm going to go through some of the roles and responsibilities that I'm sure you all have questions for after Megan does the safety and logistics presentation. So Megan's going to go through some safety and logistical components, and then I'll jump in and talk about exactly what you'll be doing the day of and how to go about getting signed up. So hold your questions to the end, and we'll take them. So I will add too that we don't know what the weather is going to be like on Saturday, but we have done our best work in the rain. So I'll hand it over to Megan. All right. Yeah.
Hello. I'm Megan. In this building, I'm sometimes called Pastor Megan. This is the congregation where I work. I also am a chaplain for the San Francisco Police Department. And that means that if there is a large mass casualty incident, I'm the person they call to help tell families that their children aren't alive anymore. Which is part of the reason I take this work really seriously. The other reason that I take this work really seriously is when I was in seminary, which is like baby pastor school. I did a lot of nonviolence training, a lot of nonviolence certification. Local San Francisco people, I trained with Father Louis from St. Boniface, who did a lot of School of America protests, and Ken Buddigan, and the Pace Vene program in Berkeley. And that's part of what reminds us about what centers us in the work that we do as volunteers. It's not our goal to be like a pretend police department. I don't know about you, but I didn't sign up for that, right? So our goal is to be, we call ourselves peace ambassadors for most of the volunteers. There's some people who have other jobs, but day of, most of us kind of turn into peace ambassadors with the goal of just facilitating a safe march and facilitating a march that hopefully matches the ideals that people are talking about from the stage. So imagine someone from the stage is talking about equality for everyone and loving everyone, and all the volunteers were like, get over there, we're mad. Doesn't work as well, right? You also, I forgot to say, will get a copy of this whole presentation emailed to you, as long as you identified that your email was correct in the sign up in the back. So take notes if you want, but you don't have to. The folk who are pictured here, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and Bayard Rustin, centered themselves in something called satyagraha. Satyagraha is something like soul force or life force, breath force. The idea is that if you are centered in what makes you your best, when you are out in the world, you will be calmer and more centered and act out your best ideals, right? You don't have to remember that it's called satyagraha, but what I want you to remember is that some of the best work that you will do for the Women's March is taking care of yourself the day before the Women's March, right? Because imagine what happens if the day before the Women's March you make yourself dehydrated and you don't eat enough food and you don't get enough sleep. I have a 6 and a 7-year-old, I can tell you what happens with them when they don't get enough sleep and they don't take care of themselves. So do what you can to eat as healthy as is in your capacity the day before so that you don't become a medical emergency the next day, right? And then you'll be available to support other people in their medical emergencies. Do what you can to get your heart in the right space. If you hoped, I would say, like, go get your nails done or go to the spa, then just, I'm saying that to you, do it. Whatever it is that helps you get to your most centered space is what I encourage you to do. Bayard Rustin, who's on the right, is a gay Quaker who went to India and studied with those who lived with Gandhi, and he kind of brings the civil rights, nonviolent protesting as we know it to the United States. He teaches nonviolence to Martin Luther King Jr. I put his picture up here in a giant way, not only because I'm a queer identified person and I think it's awesome to know about people like this, but to remind those of you who have helped with the planning of this march in any way, Bayard Rustin, not Martin Luther King Jr., was on the cover of Time magazine after the March on Washington. Right? We all remember Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, but Bayard planned it. And he, for weeks, got people to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches because he knew if people got hungry, it'd be harder for them to stay nonviolent. And he organized where the buses were going to park because people were coming from all over the country. And he did give a speech. So if you needed to know, planning the march is great. Yay, us. Okay. If you don't know much about Bayard, his little plaque in the Castro is up on 19th and Market. And there's a really great documentary about him called Brother Outsider. And you can hear him sing gospel music if that's your thing too. The sad part of the story is that he was arrested for being gay because that was against the law throughout the United States. And he was actually asked not to come to the March on Washington because of how it might stain the civil rights movement to be connected to someone who was gay. Bum, bum, bum. They changed their mind. They let him come in part because nobody else knew how to make all of the buses fit. And no one else knew how to get that many peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in that space. But it's just a good reminder as we're thinking about how we are embodying for other people the leadership of this march. These are the platforms of the Women's March. I think the whole document is like 16 pages long, so I won't pretend to like truncate each one into a sentence. But think about, as we're talking about this, what are some of the things that each of this group might have a difficulty with in being in a giant public space with 40,000 people, with a large police presence kind of on the periphery? What are the ways that we need to embody welcome that's going to make all of these groups feel like they can come and join us and march with us? Right? Can you think of a couple at least? Right. Really tight space. Sometimes when we think about disability needs, we think about wheels, but we don't always think about things like autism. Think of what that means for someone in a crowd of 40,000 people to just need a little bit of space, right? And we all kind of have ways in which rallies and marches might bother us. It's going to be super loud, which means most of your tools, if you are an audible-oriented person, and most of your ability to welcome people is based on talking to them, no one will hear you most of the time. And so changing the way you're thinking about welcoming and communicating to make it a little bit bigger, and to make your directions a little bit bigger, and to just smile no matter what happens, right, is just a different way to think about orienting yourself to the space. There's at least 4 of you in this room who just want to see a list of what's going to happen. You're numbers people, and you're mad we didn't put it earlier on the slides, because really all you want to know is when you're supposed to show up and what's going to happen. This slide is a trick, so that you will take that out of your brain and put it over here, because I don't know if you've ever been in a space with 40,000 people before, but if 40,000 people decide they're walking to Mars, we're walking to Mars, right? Because how are you going to make them turn? I don't care how big your bullhorn is. The crowd, if it has a different idea of what's going to happen, a different thing's going to happen. This is the timeline we turn into the city for all of our permitting, so it's what we try to do as much as possible. The large part in purple says that volunteers will arrive around 9:30-ish. That's also a lie, because we'll have a large number of volunteers, and if you imagined how you kind of staggered in right now, imagine 150 people all doing that at the exact same time to a tiny little tent that can seat 4 people, and you trying to sign in and get a vest and get some beads and get maybe a walkie-talkie. It makes people a little anxious. For me, it makes me mad if I have to wait in that line for 15 minutes and I skipped getting coffee because I wanted to be on time. So what Heather does is she strategically staggers the times of when you sign in. So that means if you are a come early person, go get coffee and don't come early, because Heather will make this face. She won't really. She'll get it. She's Satyagraha all the way. She's going to get it together, right? So if you're a come early person, don't come early. Come the exact time that Heather set up for you so that we can keep our staggering. Because you might by accident just make it so 150 people all show up at the exact same time by coming early or late or whatever you can do. Yep. That's my favorite part when we all do this. Because I don't play football. And it's like the closest. You never get to do that in your adult life, right? Go team. So this is the footprint of what the march and rally kind of looks like in the beginning. It's been bigger than this. It's been smaller than this. But this is kind of the general footprint. This is Polk Street. This is Grove. This is Larkin. And over here is McAllister. The stage is here, and these playgrounds down here will be closed and people can't go in them because they cost like millions of dollars and they don't want them ruined. But so what we do when we are caring for a space like this is we stay on the outside of the crowd. If you find yourself right here, and there's a medical emergency right here, you're not going to be able to get out to help the ambulance person in. If you get stuck in the middle of the crowd, you are now a participant of the rally and no longer a peace ambassador volunteer. So if you get assigned to this street or this street or this street, right, your assignments typically will be a block that you'll be a part of with a group. Your job is just to stay on the outside of the crowd. So however loud the crowd gets on that side, just keep swelling with them. If they shrink back in, kind of go in and out based on where the crowd is. Because then if there is a medical emergency, you get to do the coolest thing ever. You get to be Moses. And the people at the Women's March, for the most part, are very kind people. There'll be 7 who won't be kind, but they won't be in your area and it's fine. And so if you say, we have a medical emergency, I need to get through, and you do this, they'll just go, right? And then the people can kind of come in behind you and find the people. Right? So you're staying on the outside of the crowd as much as possible, unless you've been given a task that's something other than that by Heather or myself. But that's kind of, for the most part, a big part of what we're up to. The march itself will line up here at the corner of Grove and Larkin. And so here, in this space, will be the Native American contingent because they were here first, so they get to go first in our march. Behind that will be the Women's March banner. Behind that will be contingents who signed up. And behind that will be other people trying to line up. Over here will be a whole bunch of people trying to just be like, I'm going to get to the front of the march, it's going to be great. Or who mistakenly think it's a parade and want to wave as it walks past. We're going to do our best as the march starts lining up, to encourage people to come this way and out, rather than to cut through this way. Okay? Because that helps us to try to keep peace in one location instead of two. Make sense? So this is the official map that will be online and kind of shows where everything is. Number one is the stage. This yellow part right here is the most important part. That is the volunteer check-in. So in the morning when you come to sign in, you're going to come to Polk Street and you will sign in with Heather and all of her wonderful volunteers. This is the lost child pickup location. There you go. It's pretty, right? They made it pretty. At the beginning of the march, in front of human beings, is the ADA trolley. The ADA trolley, there's a city rule saying that vehicles and human beings shouldn't be intermixing in marches. Charlottesville is part of that reason. And so, in order for the individuals with ADA need to be on that trolley and to march before us, they need to be entirely before us. So if for some reason 40,000 people decide we're marching right now, and the ADA trolley isn't at the front, then they have to wait and they'll be the very last thing to go. Because you don't want to accidentally run someone over. So then there are, on each wheel, one volunteer to make sure each wheel is clear of people. The ADA trolley, in case you know people who want to be on it, is not something you should get off and on of, especially while it's moving. Once it's moving, you're kind of on it. So the front of the march, remember I said we'll have our Native American contingent. Here's the reality of what it looks like when everyone's starting to line up for the march. This is the Native American group we want to go first. This is 25,000 people wanting to go first. So as it gets closer to the beginning of the march, I'm going to have a whole bunch of peace ambassadors just come here and make kind of a line so that we can in fact start the march out. What that means is, depending upon safety issues, we might scooch the front of the march closer and closer to Market Street. That's just with the goal of having the front of the march be the front of the march. So if it's 12:30 and the front of the march now has moved up to Hyde, and you're like, what's happening? It doesn't necessarily mean that the march has started early. It just means that people have started wanting to march early, and so we've just kind of scooched a little bit. Make sense? The other thing to note is that there will be some barricades here that are concrete. Remember Charlottesville? And they will get moved before we're marching, but they look like they're way too heavy for us to move. They are way too heavy for us to move. Other people are moving them, but just know that that's all a part of the plan. It's not something you have to worry about. So, I'm going to teach you a couple of formations this year because last year we learned 2 formations and it worked. So, I have really high faith in you guys. Think we can do it? Okay. So this, remember, because I can't tell you anything because you're not going to hear me, is going to be circle up. I might yell circle up because I am loud. But so this is like some really tiny community that had a women's march, and they had their peace ambassadors kind of make a little half circle in front of the banner. And last year at this training, I said, ha ha ha, but we could never make that happen, right? Challenge accepted. They exactly 100% made that happen last year. And so the front of the banner had this little circle on it. The reason that's really important is because for like the half hour before the march start, there's like a bazillion press people in here not paying attention to each other. Yeah. And if there's not enough space for them, they sometimes push each other. But they won't this year because we'll have this really beautiful semicircle. The thing you want to notice about how they are with each other is they are holding hands, not locking elbows. The reason they're doing that is because people that you are volunteering with might or might not want to tell you their full medical history while you're volunteering with them. So you're not going to know who's got shoulder issues, who's got elbow issues. And if something happened, like my second grader decided to play Red Rover through here, it's a lot easier to just let go of hands than it is to unlock elbows. So it's a safer way to kind of be with each other. Circle up, right? All right. Now I need 4 people to come up here. Stand up. You know you want to. Okay, come on forward. That's like automatically 4 people. Wow. 1. All right, so this is going to be the sign for make a line. Make a line. Yeah.
Do you want to answer?
I like doing it because it's the sign. Right, this is a great way to do it because now we've taken a lot of space, right? We could hold hands if we wanted to. The second way that we're going to make a line is going to be a game I play with my kids called Mama Duck. Mama Duck, if I'm the Mama Duck, means we go this way. Mama Duck! Right? So make a line. Mama Duck. All right, yeah, you got it. You can sit down now. Good job. Good job. The 2 places we're making the line is very, very important is at the end of the march. This is a picture from last year. Heather, you look great. You don't even look exhausted from moving barricades at all. But we need to have a full line all the way across so that people and first responders, after the march, DPW comes and like cleans the streets. So making it just really clear when the march is done is really important. And this is a photo of people who are doing it wrong, right? Because they're locking elbows, not holding hands. But if for some reason, since it's an election year, yeah, deep breath. We have some counter-protesters. What we would do is turn away from the people because what we're doing is preventing whatever intended, purposeful, racist comments or hurtful comments are being shouted at people. We're just trying to create enough of a distance that it's too hard to hear them. In Oakland, there was a court case one where an individual named Batman, bat like baseball bat, won an $85,000 lawsuit by shouting racist things at someone. You can imagine someone in Oakland got so pissed they punched him. Because they punched him first, he had the apparent legal authority to beat the crap out of that person with his bat. And he won $85,000 in court because the guy punched him first. Meaning, the individual who punched him paid for an entire year of that individual traveling to other protests and shouting hateful things at people. So none of us are like inclined to do an Indiana Jones punch a Nazi kind of behavior, right? Because our satyagraha will be really strong. We'll have had our coffee early enough. We're going to be centered. So part of why we're doing that is well, here's what I'll say is most of those counter-protesters, in my experience, are filming because they want to go to the rally and show how you don't live up to the principles of the Women's March. You say you welcome all women, so some woman's going to come and say, blah, da, 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 so that you'll say, meh, and they'll say, see the hate women, right? And you don't want to be the 4-second clip of a hateful viral video either. So we'll do make a line facing away from the person, unless they're acting in a strange way and we feel like we don't need to. Oftentimes when people are doing that, they'll pay attention to the muscles in your back because they're trying to see who they have pissed off. And usually when you're mad and you've fixed your face, your back goes, right? Your back starts to tense up and they'll target the person who is tensing up. So know that if you are just because you're the nearest, something like that doesn't mean you're the person who has to stand there. If you don't need to hear that day, you don't need to be the person who, there are plenty of volunteers of lots of diverse kind of cultural and ethnic backgrounds, abilities to stand there and listen to vile things, right? So it's better to kind of tap out of that situation and have someone else be the person who stands near there than to become injured emotionally or physically, or to have your PTSD triggered, okay? bum, bum, bum. For the most part, I'm going to try to use silly examples because I don't know what people have encountered in their lives. And because our world is scary, right? And you don't need to imagine more things. So, starting now, I'm going to use silly examples. Okay? So the goals of our volunteers, in order of most importance, is to try to help with a safe rally and march. When it is safe to de-escalate potential issues, that could be anything from a person experiencing a mental health issue to counter-protesters, but only things, my caution on that would be, before you and your group head out into the crowd to do your volunteer task for that day, just find out what each other does for a living, what experiences you've had, what things you're good at. Someone's going to be an introvert, and they're going to want to like listen on the radio but not talk to humans, right? Somebody probably has worked in places where there are homeless folk before. Someone maybe will be a nurse, right? So learn each other's skill sets before something happens so that if you're like, oh yeah, this is you, good luck, right? And then we'll make medical referrals, so the walkie-talkies that we'll have will be faster than 911 to helping someone get an ambulance or other care that they need. Observe and report, I'll talk more about in a minute. And then one of our tasks also is if there was some sort of natural disaster or mass casualty incident, if a cotton candy factory just couldn't turn off, like Lucy, you know, with the chocolate, and all the cotton candy goes into Market Street, and for some reason it gets too sticky to walk down Market Street, we might divert the march to Mission Street. That's actually the street we would get diverted to, and we would walk around it, unless it rained, because then, you know, cotton candy's just gone. I'm going to say this a bunch of times because I actually mean it, and I want you to hear it. No individual should take on a task beyond your training level, beyond your comfort zone, or beyond what is safe for you, physically, mentally, or emotionally. So what we ask people to do is, if something happens that's unusual, that afterwards you check in with each other out loud, even if you can't hear the person, and everyone just confirms that they feel like they can continue volunteering, right? I can't make you be honest, that's on you, right? And sometimes we don't realize things are off until later, but if something happens immediately afterwards, even if it seems like it's not a big deal, the thing that happened, just check in and confirm that everyone feels like they're still kind of okay to go. Because if they're not, someone in your group might be a therapist or a nurse, right? Observe and report. Observe and report does not mean that if you see someone steal the words off of the Twitter building, that you have to go collect them or know electrically how to reinstall them. I don't think they have words, I think they just have the bird, right? Yeah. So you don't have to, you're not signing up to be Batman. What we're asking you to do is to just observe what happened from a safe distance, call it in on the radio, and particularly if you think that there is someone who is a threat to themselves or others, right? It does not have to be you. If you are someone for whom you wouldn't want to like testify, if there was a court case, or if you have a moral reason that you've decided you don't like to participate in the judicial system, or even other vulnerabilities that would make that really difficult for you. That doesn't mean every single person has to be willing to like help with a police report. It just means each group needs to have at least one person who is. Does that make sense? Yeah. crowd control. Again, this is one to make you feel better because, again, the crowd is in control. But there are some ways that we can help to make things better sometimes. We can smile. We can remain calm. One of the things that's backwards in a giant crowd that you might not expect intuitively is that when someone is yelling at you, if you are quieter than them, they will be quieter. Because strangely, they're shouting because they want you to hear them. And if you're speaking quieter, they will adjust their volume to your volume in hopes that you will hear them. So anyone who has been a parent before could be the lead on that. Saying thank you. I know there's a number of times where I have needed to get something done and I got impatient and probably should have eaten a little bit earlier and I'm like, just move! Thank you! And then I go, and that's my way of saying, I'm sorry I was a jerk, but I acknowledge it, right? And people will shout you're welcome instead of other things that I probably deserved. If you can explain clearly what's happening, most people will move, like I said, and just like with my small children, the fewer words that you use, the less arguing there is about it. So you're like, medical issue, right? But not somebody's full health information, right? Using exaggerated hand gestures. Over there, the part. Go to Mission Street. Everything's diverted to Mission Street. All the buses, all of the Ubers and Lyfts, Mission Street. And then again, just a reminder, you're holding hands if you're making a line or a circle. Paying attention to safety issues is one of the least fun jobs because it, again, feels like parenting, but it's one of the most important. And then that just means if you see a giant pothole in the road and everyone's doing this, someone in a yellow vest might stand in front of the pothole, and as someone comes walking towards you, you'd say, look up! That happens a lot. One of the first marches, there was a homeless individual who was sitting, and we literally just had 4 volunteers on each side that would tell people, look up! Because people didn't see him and they were not intending to cause harm, but were accidental. When I say pay attention to people who are acting unusually, I want to remind you I'm not talking about people who might look unusual, because they're kind of our key demographic. Right? Because remember what our tenets are? We want to value people of different races and different body shapes and different cultural backgrounds, right? So it's not people who look unusual, it's behaviors that seem unusual, like an NRA t-shirt and no women around them, right? Yeah. And then pay attention if you see someone with a weapon. Wah, wah. All right, so this happened at the first march. One of the #1 kind of safety things that happens is that people climb on things because they want to see, and they want to take a picture of themselves with the full crowd. And so we're going to practice this one. You can practice it while sitting, and it's a parenting technique some of you might already know, and it goes like this. Okay, now let's see it. That's right. I feel like I can, yeah, and the smile. Sometimes I don't though. But then, when they don't, because they're like, they're always that age too. Then you do it again. Go ahead. Yeah. And then when they still don't do it, right? And then when they come down, thank you. Yes, but don't say that part. You could think a lot of things that you don't say out loud and still have satyagraha. Yeah. So if you see me trying to get your attention and showing you the thing and then saying get them down, it's because people will climb on telephone poles, light poles, signal poles. At the end of the march, when we get to the Embarcadero, there's these stupid pillars that are this tall. And for an hour and a half, we're going to tell people to get off them. And the second we turn our eyes away, the same people are going to climb back on them, right? This is a photo of when it rained. But the important part of this photo is these gaps. So one of the things that we'll be working on as our march walks down Market Street is to try to eliminate as many gaps as we can. In part because the picture looks cooler from above in the helicopter, right? And if the power of this march, like Gandhi marched 300 miles so that it could be in the press that the people of India wanted Britain to be, right? And the civil rights, think of all the places they marched. And so we want our march to be powerful, and one of the ways that's communicated is by, anyone ever watch the news later and you're like, you see the helicopter thing and they have like LA's march here and DC's march here and it always looks awesome, and you see San Francisco's in there and you're like, ours was bigger, and then you're excited. Let's not have gaps because our picture will look the coolest, right? That's part of it, but also there are some people for whom having a larger police presence is what makes them feel less safe at the march. The smaller the length of our march route, the fewer police officers that need to be alongside of us. Because post-Charlottesville, to be kind of a buffer of last resorts, first responders in San Francisco will be literal human airbags to our march. So that's why you'll see some of them on the sides of our march. The more compact we are, the fewer, right? Yeah. All right, this is the thing that I have to say because our insurance requires it. Are you ready? The insurance of the San Francisco Women's March does not allow volunteers to provide medical assistance. Some of you might have training, you might have skills, you might feel a moral obligation to help someone prior to a first responder arriving. As a person of faith, and not as the insurance of the Women's March, let's keep people safe. The insurance of the San Francisco Women's March does not allow volunteers to provide medical assistance. Got it? You can provide comfort and safety, and then the first responders really are pretty quick. They'll get there within a couple of minutes when there's a medical emergency because the Women's March pays for roving medical teams who have like giant bags of medical supplies, and we also pay for 3 ambulances that are kind of connected to the Women's March to provide service. So they would get there likely before even the city's ambulances arrived. Missing people. If the person who is missing is a child or a vulnerable adult, take down all of the information, find out where they were last seen, call dispatch immediately. There's a lot of peace ambassadors all over the place. We'll do our best to find the child or the vulnerable adult. If the person who is missing is someone who totally agreed to be here at 3 o'clock via text, and text isn't working anymore, why aren't they here? Can you find my friend Sam? And there are 40,000 people at this march, then your response might be something like, texting is down. Maybe you can text them a place to meet at the end of the march and enjoy a late lunch together, right? Because sometimes the report of a missing person is just, I can't find my friend. So ask a couple of questions to find out like the nature of that. A lot of people who come to the march are coming from other cities or are tourists, and so their questions might be because they're not used to living in a big city. So this graphic of a lost and found box is the only lost and found box of the San Francisco Women's March. Because, has anyone ever been to the Civic Center before? Has anyone ever lost their water bottle in a public place in San Francisco? How many of you expected to get it back 10 minutes later when you discovered you had lost it? Right, but a lot of people visiting our march will be from other places, and so they might care very deeply about their green water bottle. And they want you to find it right now with 40,000 people in the plaza. You're going to very kindly, I'm telling you this right now so you can fix your face. Have whatever face you want right now. So that when someone can't find their coat or their backpack and isn't from the city, you're not going to make the face of, for real? If the individual, however, when they're reporting that it's lost and stolen for you, if kind of learning that this is a large city and they're probably not going to get their thing back, if they're still livid, which does happen sometimes, and it's appropriate to tell this person, they can make a report at Northern Police Station, and if after the march it's turned in, then Northern Police Station can help them recover their stolen or lost property. Raise your hand if you think they're going to get their water bottle. Okay. Right, but that's about giving them a solution to their problem because they're mad. If they're still mad at you, that you told them to file a police report, you're going to do what makes my kids feel better. You're going to write it down. Have you ever noticed as humans, when something is actually important, we write it down, and when we don't think it's important, we don't write it down? Anybody ever write down what a telemarketer said to them? What if your boss calls? Maybe, right? So it can help to have just a small notebook and a pen, or have at least one person in your group who has a notebook and a pen. I think we have some that will be at Volunteer Central that people can take with them. Just the simple act of like, tell me everything about your water bottle. I'm going to write it all down. There is no place to turn in your notes about the water bottle, except for to this graphic of a lost and found box. Does that make sense? But now you know what to do with it. Mandated reporting. So we are asking you, if you're not already, to be a mandated reporter during the time that you are volunteering for the march. What that means is, if you see someone who is a threat to themselves or others, that you would report it on your walkie-talkie. Or if you see abuse happening to a child under the age of 18, or someone above the age of 63, that you would report that. Because that's our platform, people, to not have violence happen to people, right? Again, same rules apply as an observer report. You don't have to be the person who reports it, but there should be at least one person in your group who is willing to be the mandated reporter person who could report it. Because at our march will be a lot of children. And hopefully most of them will have their parents' phone number written on their arm. But if our goal with this march is to have a safe space for women and children, then let's make our march be that place. All right, this is the scary slide, but it's going to be okay. Disasters and mass casualty incidents. So if for some reason on the day of, there is a fireworks parade. I've never heard of one, but so maybe there's a fireworks parade. A parade that just celebrates fireworks and shoots them off everywhere. In the case of a disaster or something unexpected happening in a big way, there would be 4 things that you would do. First thing you would do is just stay still and check if you're okay. That means you're going to not only just look at your body, but you're going to feel it, because the adrenaline of a disaster means that you can't always feel pain. Then, if you feel comfortable doing it, you're going to ask a second person to check. And you can be very specific if you want them to check by touching, or if you want them to check by looking. Right? Once you have figured out that you are safe, before you move, you're going to look around. And you're going to move your whole head, because in an emergency, our vision goes this wide. And so you have to move your whole head, because you don't want to be fine and then step into all of the whistlers. You guys don't know the names of fireworks here. You're not from South Dakota. Come on, people. Right? So you're going to look around. You're going to make sure you don't step right in something that's dangerous. You're going to connect with your peace ambassador team if that's possible, unless you've all gone your own directions and you found safe places to be. With the radio, you would wait to hear where to go next. Because if I made a location and I said, well, once all the fireworks go off, we're all going to meet at the corner of Mission and Howard. If it turned out all the fireworks were at Mission and Howard, I would have just had you go towards the thing that was dangerous. So there's no place to meet up. But what we would do is listen to first responders who are going to have more eyes around the space about where the safe places to go are. Then, if you're still in a place, right, you have to check in on yourself, because after a thing happens, we all say, are you still okay to volunteer? If you still feel like you're okay to volunteer, we would follow the commands and instructions of first responders, which would start with, do you need help? And if they said no, you would just wait. Okay? But mostly what you're going to do is answer dumb questions all day. They won't be dumb questions. They'll be very important to the people who are asking them. What is the schedule of events, they'll say, because they are like the 4 people in this room who needed to see that schedule. What route will the march take down Market Street? Is alcohol, smoking, nudity, and weed allowed at the event? And you're going to make some joke about not being a cop and this being San Francisco, right? Like, seriously. They're going to ask you if public transportation was rerouted, and you're going to answer? Yes. Where? Mission Street. Yay! Mission Street. And then they're going to ask, if they ask you if medical services are available, what are you going to say?
Yes. Yes.
No. Do you need them? What is happening? Because most people don't ask if medical services are needed just because they're like, ooh, this is planned well. What's happening and how can I help you, right? Because, and then you can say, if they say, is there an emergency, should we call 911? You'd say, I can call them right now on my radio. And then you can even, if you are someone who likes to plan, ponder questions people might ask you, but seriously, save it for whoever's the extrovert in your group. Did anybody watch this movie? Mighty Ducks? Right. This is our next formation. Who's volunteered before? Okay, come up here. So this is not, I'm not a crook. This is going to be for the Flying V. Mighty Ducks win the hockey tournament by doing the Flying V, which is another, I guess it's just a duck related thing. Get up here, Heather. So if I yell, Flying V, people are going to go in a V, right? I'm the mama duck. So you're going to go into a V. This is particularly helpful when Nancy Pelosi comes to our march, and people won't stop taking selfies with her, but she has to get in her car because she booked a thing that she's late to, and then has to drive away, but there's too many people. It's like the Beatles when Nancy Pelosi is at the march. And then I might shout, Flying V! And wherever I move to, the V then moves. Okay? Flying V. It's about creating space for a thing to happen back here, right? And just kind of keeping people off to the side. Flying V. The Flying V is what we employ at the end of the march Because if you've ever been to the Embarcadero, it just kind of stops, right? In order for 40,000 people to make it down Market Street, we have to convince the first 35,000 to go home. So the last 10,000 can actually get down the street, right? So at the end of the march, everyone is going to turn around. We're going to make a giant flying V. And the V is going to go from either side of Market Street. And it's going to just push them off the street and back onto the sidewalk. And I'll be shouting on a bullhorn, everything's on Mission Street, go that way, okay? And some of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, sassy drag queens, will be saying it in a slightly sassier way that hopefully is effective. If there is a group that decides they want to have their own rally at that end spot, you're not going to do what I did when that happened. And I was just like, rah! Thank you. We're just going to move our flying V to the other side of whatever speeches they're doing, right? So that people can still get diverted to the sidewalks. Stopping a march is the hardest part of having a march, right? Because it's fun to march. And here's my trick with any kids. I promise them that their parents are taking them to ice cream on Mission Street. The parents don't like it, but the kids are like, let's go. Because they're usually like, I'm tired. And I'm like, ice cream. They're like, it's good. So, right? Flying V. You got it? All right. For those of you who need a list to figure out how to calm someone down, I have made a list for you. Again, it'll be in the PDF. We've gone over a lot of these. If it's not your job, ask for help from somebody else. Try not to touch people if you can manage it, because you don't know what their relationship is to being touched. Listen more than you speak. The great thing about listening in a context like this is you probably can't hear most of what they're saying, so it's a lot easier to listen. Do you know what I mean? That means that your body is going to listen if your ears can't. So that's all of those like active listening skills. Yeah. Things like intoxication or mental health issues, if you have someone in your group who's good at that, that's a good way to handle that. Trying to find a compromise so someone feels like they won can be helpful too. Staying as calm as possible, and then like don't make promises. You don't have like stuff you could promise anyway, so it's probably an easy one to do, right? The more you can have just one person be the one who's talking, the better. So it's not like a group of people that are like making it a big issue, but if it's one person and then people are coming back a little bit, that can be helpful just to have, instead of having someone yell and try to like make a bunch of people mad, if they just like hone that on one person who's tough and can take it, that's an easier way to do it. So when something is happening that you feel like you don't have the skills to handle yourself or your team can't handle yourself, don't split your team up. You don't need to split your team up to get help because someone will have a radio, right? And particularly always make sure everyone's got a buddy. The two-way radio, which I'm not going to teach you a lot about tonight because it's easier to practice once they're in your hand. You can use to connect to dispatch or to have other peace ambassadors come and support you. Or if you need a cosmetologist because there's a makeup emergency, then we could call for a cosmetologist. You're gonna, if you need to create a barrier so that if someone trips on the sidewalk, people don't accidentally step on them and have a second emergency, pick one person to be the communicator. Once emergency responders arrive, you're going to pick one person who's going to relay the information that you have. Here's what happened. If you happen to have a nurse in your group who like knows what information is helpful to relay, pick that person to do it. Because otherwise, I just come up with stuff I saw in Grey's Anatomy. Clear. I don't know. You want to tell the people on the radio when something is completed. So you would say, the event site is clear. So that they know that that's done. Because if something else happens half a block away, and it's a new person who needs a cosmetologist, right? Because it's raining, lots of makeup emergencies that day. You don't want the people in dispatch to be confused and think, oh, they already have a cosmetologist because we sent one already. So you want to make sure you say new incident if a second thing happens, and that can help, especially if we need 2 ambulances. You'll get to read this later, but mostly the thing I want you to remember is nobody can hear you. If you put the walkie-talkie too close to your mouth, no one can hear you, right? So don't move. Okay. That's the number one thing you need to know. All right? You got it? Mama, come on.
Yeah.
Flying bee. Heather.
All right, so we're going to talk about some of the roles and responsibilities that you can sign up for, what to bring, and some next step things. So the day of the march, what are the different jobs that we need folks to do? And some of these depend on how early in the morning you'd like to get up. So as Megan mentioned, we have volunteers arriving staggered at different times. That's so we can do a check-in and an orientation for everybody. And then, move on to the next group. So if your check-in time is at 10 a.m., and you show up a half an hour early or 15 minutes early, grab a cup of coffee and we'll see you back at 10 a.m. So the first job, who here is a morning person? Yeah, like a really early morning person, because we need people to help set up and close streets at 6 a.m. And so the setup team and the street closure team shows up at 6 a.m. and is there until about 10 a.m. The other area that we have, rally area safety, they show up at 10 a.m. and go until about 2:30. So our peace ambassadors are broken up into 2 areas. We have rally area safety, and then the other one is march area safety. March area safety arrives at 11 a.m. and is there until about 3:30. So the big difference between those 2 is the rally area safety folks will work in groups of about 2 to 4 to go to specific areas around the footprint of the rally, so around Civic Center. You'll get an intersection or a block, and then you'll be listening on your walkie-talkies for if we need peace ambassadors in one area, maybe because we have to move somebody or we have to get a vehicle through. Maybe there's a counter protest and we want to make sure that nothing escalates. So the rally area safety folks will get assigned a spot to start with, and then we'll probably move to different areas. But you'll be in groups, and you'll be making sure that it's a smooth event for everyone, and that if anybody has needs that arise, that we can make sure we get people the help that they need. So that's rally area safety. March area safety is the other one. So for folks who are doing march area safety, that kind of looks a couple different ways. First off, you saw the flying V at the front of the march, right, or the U. That's march area safety. So we need folks at the front of the march to kind of help keep that moving. And then that also means lining the streets at certain areas, helping keep people who think it's a parade, not a march, on the sidewalk, and keeping marchers moving along. So if you really want to move with the march, or you want to be right there by the banner, march area safety is a good one for you. With rally area safety, when you finish up, you will still be able to jump in and march if you want to. And so again, rally area safety shows up at 10, march area safety shows up at 11. I will send all of this out, you don't have to remember it. And if there are folks who have mobility limitations where you're going to be standing, or where you don't want to be standing for a long period of time or at all, shoot me an email or come see me afterwards, because I have specific areas that we still need other people for. So one of the questions I get asked a lot is, can I volunteer with my friend? And yes, absolutely. So when you sign up for your day of roll, there'll be a spot where you can specifically say, I would like to volunteer with so-and-so. Just make sure that you sign up for the same area. And so after the training tonight, we're going to send you an email with the PowerPoint presentation in a PDF format, and as well as a link to a signup.com event that I use to sign people up for specific roles. So you'll click on that link and you'll decide if you want to show up really early and help set up, if you want to do rally area safety, or if you want to do march area safety. And so the next thing I get asked a lot is, what should we bring? The first thing to consider is a stuff containment system. That can be a backpack, that can be a really stylish fanny pack, but make sure that you don't have loose items that you need to leave at the volunteer tent. So at the end of the event, we try and break things down really quickly. And inevitably, I end up with a whole bunch of people's jackets and water bottles and backpacks. Green water bottles. And I don't know who they are and what they belong to, and we're breaking down the tent and the table, and then we end up with a big pile of stuff. So bring something to have your stuff in. Every once in a while I hear people think that they can't bring backpacks to the march. You can. You need to keep your stuff in it. Because you need things like water. You should definitely bring a water bottle. Snacks. We'll have food for folks, but a lot of you will be roving around Civic Center, or you'll be up and down the march areas. You won't necessarily make it back to the volunteer tent to eat a sandwich, so bring snacks. We don't know what the weather is going to be like. We are marching sun or rain. We do our best work in the rain. So weather appropriate clothes, maybe you want to have a rain layer stuffed in your backpack. And then appropriate shoes. So what I'm wearing, right? This is not appropriate footwear. Don't wear slip-ons to the march. Don't wear flip-flops.
Closed toes, comfy to walk 2 miles.
Yep. Yes.
Waterproof if you can.
Especially if you are
broken in before that day.
Yeah, broken in before that day. Especially if you're doing march area safety, because you're gonna go to the end of the march, and then you might end up needing to march all the way back if you left your stuff there, or your friend, or you're meeting up with people. So you'll be on your feet a lot. So comfy shoes are really important. And then for anybody who's under 18, you'll need a parent or guardian or person who signs your things to sign a waiver. And so I'll throw that in with the training documents that we send out, because the day of the march, we have folks sign a volunteer waiver due to our fiscal sponsorship. They have a waiver for volunteers. And so folks who are under 18, unless you bring your parent or guardian with you, you're gonna need to bring that waiver the day of. Anything else you can think of that you want to bring? Important things? Yeah, you really don't need a whole lot, but a backpack is really handy to have that stuff on you. Sunscreen? Optimistically? Yeah, all that stuff.
Battery pack or something for your phone?
There you go. That's always a handy one, the little charger battery packs. The first year our phones didn't work, but sometimes they did. They'll probably work this time, I think. All right, so the day of the march, right? You know where you're checking in. You know what time you're checking in. You have all your stuff. So what's that going to look like? So you'll check in at the volunteer table, which is going to be in front of Civic Center. Some people stress out that they're not going to be able to find it. You'll see us. I'll be wearing a Giants cowboy hat, so I'm really easy to find. It'll be the volunteer tent. Lots of stuff, lots of yellow vests, lots of walkie-talkies. So come check in at the volunteer tent. We're going to give you a few things. You're going to get a bright yellow vest so that everybody sees you and knows you're a peace ambassador and we can see you. Somebody in your team of people will get a radio. And then you'll get a badge that says volunteer so that, again, it's easy to spot folks. You're going to get a name tag, and you're going to keep that on just until we deploy you off into your section. I wouldn't recommend going off as a volunteer with a name tag on there. That is just when we are doing a group orientation, so I know, like, okay, Heather and Megan are in group 1, and you can, get everybody's name. Then pull that sucker right off.
Sometimes you're an extrovert, and then go for it.
Yeah. And then the other thing that you're going to get are colorful beads. And it may seem silly, but we hand out color-coded beads to each group because it helps you find your team members and it helps us identify folks. So for the rally area safety folks, you'll get red beads. And for the march area safety folks, you'll get gold beads. Very deliberate colors. And so so when you go to look for, when I tell you to go look for the march area people, you'll be like, great, gold beads, no problem. So you'll get your beads. We'll group up. We'll do an orientation. Megan will show you how to use the walkie-talkie if you're using a walkie-talkie, and then we'll give you a geographical assignment. This geographical assignment is likely to move. You might start out at a corner, and we'll ask your group, we need red 2 over to the corner of wherever, and so we'll have you move. And then the other thing we're handing out this year is you'll get an event summary. So you'll get a list with who's speaking when, because people ask that all the time, and then some instructions to give people for how to start marching. Afterwards, when you're done, and it's been an amazing, successful march, we need your stuff back. So please return your vest, your walkie-talkie, and your badge to one of 2 places. The first place, and this is if you're moving along in the march, is with Heather Lozano over here. Heather, stand up. Heather Lozano, not to be confused with me, Heather Landeros, is our trolley coordinator. So Heather will be at the end on Market and Spear with the mobility trolley collecting all of your badges, vests, and walkie-talkies that you checked out. The other spot where you can return that is the volunteer tent where you got it. But we'll be breaking down that volunteer tent, so it really just depends on where you go. You can keep the party beads in the name tag. Then, of course, if you're not too exhausted, at the very end, we always need help breaking down barricades. I don't have people sign up for this specific role because people tend to get excited about it and then not show up. It's always a hodgepodge of people, so we're just going to roll with that this year. So if you are not too pooped, please come help me move a couple barricades, and we'll get everything broken down in Civic Center. And then lastly, we don't really know a number of factors that are going to kind of determine what it looks like. We don't know what the weather is going to be like. Hopefully it's sunny, but it might not be. And then we also don't really know how many people are going to show up. We have estimates. I mean, our permit is for a specific number, but we've been traditionally bad at getting this number right in the past. The first year we did this, we hadn't gotten, it was December, we weren't getting a whole lot of attention. We very optimistically said, maybe 10,000 people, that'd be great. And then about a week before, we started seeing reports of 30,000 people. And we're like, wow, that's awesome. That's probably not going to happen. It's supposed to rain. A few days before, all of the RSVPs added up to 60,000. And we're like, wow, that's a lot. That's across multiple platforms. People probably RSVP'd who aren't going to show up. We're not going to have that many people. And as the rain came down and I stood out there with a couple of the coordinators and the police captain, and she looked at us and said, this is not 30,000 people, because it was about 100,000 people. And all of that came in at the last minute. So the takeaway for us was that momentum builds late, but when it does, it builds fast.
And probably on Twitter because somebody was.
We never know. The world around us has a lot to do with how many people show up to events. So in addition to bringing your water bottle and your backpack, etc., bring your flexibility and your creativity. And so just lastly, I want to thank everybody for all of the energy that you'll be putting into Saturday and for making this a meaningful event for folks. If you didn't check in the back, we want to make sure that we get your email address right and that we know you were here. And then if you have any questions at the end, Meg and I will go ahead and take them. So thanks, everybody. All right.